A Clear Intention by David Russo. What if the biggest obstacle in your life isn't a lack of talent, time, or opportunity, but a lack of clarity? Every day, people wake up, work hard, stay busy, and still feel like they're drifting, not because they don't care, but because they've never stopped to define one thing: a clear intention. Clarity is power, and once you have it, everything changes. Chapter 1. The Cost of Being Unclear. There's a difference between moving forward and just moving. At first, it's hard to tell. Your days are full. Your schedule is packed. You're answering messages, meeting expectations, checking boxes, and doing what needs to be done. From the outside, it looks like progress. From the inside, it can feel like something is missing. That something is clarity. When your intention isn't clear, your energy has nowhere to anchor. It spreads out across to many directions, trying to please people, chasing opportunities that don't quite fit, reacting to whatever feels urgent in the moment. You become responsive instead of intentional, and over time, that comes at a cost. You start to feel tired, not because you're doing too much, but because you're doing too much that doesn't matter. Decisions feel heavier because there's no internal filter to guide them. Even simple choices, what to say yes to, what to walk away from, begin to drain your mental energy. Without clarity, everything feels equally important, and when everything feels important, nothing truly is. This is how burnout begins, not always from overwork, but from misalignment. There's a pattern you can see clearly in sports. Some people move from one sport to another, trying everything, staying active, always involved. On the surface, it looks like versatility, but over time, something becomes noticeable. They never quite go deep enough in any one area to truly excel. They become a jack of all sports, but a master of none. Not because they lack ability, not because they aren't working hard, but because their focus is constantly shifting. Their effort is real, it's just not anchored. I've seen the other side of that. I played tennis in college, not because I was naturally more talented than everyone else, but because I committed to it early. I put in the lessons when I was younger and stayed with it long enough for that effort to compound. That consistency created an opportunity that wouldn't have existed if I had kept switching directions. The difference wasn't just the sport, it was the intention behind the choice to stay with it. The same pattern shows up in work. When I was selling cars, I stayed at the same dealership. I didn't jump from place to place chasing what looked better in the moment. It's easy to believe the grass is greener somewhere else. There's always another opportunity, another environment, another promise of something better. But there's a different way to think about it. Instead of looking for greener grass, you can plant and grow it where you are. Over time, I started to see the results of that decision. Customers began calling me directly because of my reputation on a car review site. I had repeat buyers asking for me. Referrals started to come in consistently. None of that would have happened if I had kept starting over in a new place. That kind of trust takes time to build, and time only works in your favor when you stay long enough for your effort to compound. This is what clarity does. It keeps you in one place long enough to see results that don't happen quickly. It allows your work, your reputation, and your relationships to grow into something meaningful, something that can't be recreated by constantly switching directions. This is how lack of clarity shows up in everyday life. You can be busy, active, and constantly moving while still drifting. You can explore endlessly without ever committing deeply enough to create meaningful progress. Clarity doesn't mean you never try new things. It means you recognize when it's time to stop switching and start building. You may find yourself saying yes when you mean no, taking paths that look good on the outside but feel wrong on the inside, starting things with excitement only to lose motivation halfway through because the deeper reason was never clear to begin with. The result isn't failure, it's frustration, because deep down, you know you're capable of more, not more activity, but more meaning, more direction, more intention behind the way you live and the choices you make. Clarity changes that. When your intention becomes clear, something shifts. You no longer feel pulled in every direction. You begin to recognize what deserves your time and what doesn't. Decisions become lighter, not because they're easier, but because they're aligned. You stop asking, "What should I do?" and start asking, "Does this match my intention?" That one question can save you hours, days, even years of misplaced effort. But clarity doesn't appear on its own. It requires honesty. It requires stepping back from the noise long enough to see what's actually driving your actions. And for many people, that's the hardest part, because staying busy is easier than being honest about what's not working. Still, the cost of avoiding clarity is always higher. Every unclear decision leads to another. Every misaligned step takes you further from where you actually want to be. And the longer it goes on, the harder it becomes to recognize the gap between movement and meaning. This chapter is not about judgment, it's about awareness. Because once you see the cost of being unclear, you can no longer ignore it. And that's where change begins. Chapter 2. What is a clear intention? Clarity begins with a simple shift in understanding. Intention is not the same as a goal. Most people are taught to focus on goals. Goals are specific, measurable, and outcome-driven. They answer questions like, what do I want to achieve? Or where do I want to end up? And while goals are useful, they only tell part of the story. Intention goes deeper. If a goal is the destination, intention is the direction you choose to travel in. Regardless of how long it takes or what obstacles appear along the way, it shapes not just what you do, but how and why you do it. For example, a goal might be to earn more money, but the intention behind it could be stability, freedom, security, or even validation. Two people can share the same goal, but be driven by completely different intentions, and that difference will shape their decisions, their behavior, and ultimately their experience. There was also a point where I started to notice this difference in my own life. When I was selling cars, I was doing well. I had built relationships, developed consistency, and created a reputation for myself. From the outside, nothing looked off, but internally, I started becoming more aware of the structure of what I was doing. I could only be with one customer at a time, sometimes a few in a day. My impact was real, but limited. And when I wasn't working, I wasn't being paid. My time and income were directly connected. At first, I didn't fully understand why that bothered me, but over time, it became clearer. It wasn't frustration with the work itself. It was awareness of scale. That's when I started thinking about leverage, time, and reach. I could only be with one customer at a time, sometimes a few in a day. I started thinking differently, not just about doing good work, but about building something that could reach more people at once. Something that didn't stop the moment I stopped working. That shift didn't mean I wanted to abandon what I was doing. It just meant my intention was evolving, and I started to see the gap between where I was and what I felt drawn toward building. Even while still doing the job, I couldn't ignore that awareness. Because clarity doesn't always require you to leave immediately. Sometimes it just shows you what you're moving toward long before you get there. This is why goals alone often fall short. You can achieve a goal and still feel unfulfilled if the intention behind it was unclear or misaligned. You can check every box and still feel like something is off, not because the outcome was wrong, but because the direction didn't truly belong to you. A clear intention acts as an internal compass. It guides you when choices aren't obvious. It helps you filter opportunities, distractions, and demands. Instead of reacting to everything that comes your way, you begin to move with purpose. You stop asking, "Is this a good opportunity?" and start asking, "Is this right for me?" That question changes everything, because not every opportunity deserves your time. Not every path deserves your energy. Without intention, it's easy to say yes to things that look right on the surface, but pull you further away from what actually matters. Clarity doesn't mean your path will always be easy. It means your path will be yours. It also brings consistency. When your intention is clear, your actions begin to align naturally. You don't have to constantly force discipline or rely on motivation. Decisions become less about willpower and more about alignment. You act in ways that match who you are and what you value, not just what you feel in the moment. And perhaps most importantly, intention gives meaning to progress. Without it, progress is just movement. With it, even small steps feel significant because they are connected to something deeper. You're not just doing things. You're building something that reflects who you are. So, before you focus on what you want to achieve, take a step back and ask a more important question. Why does it matter? Your answer to that question is where clarity begins. Chapter 3. Noise versus knowing. One of the biggest obstacles to a clear intention isn't a lack of desire, it's too much noise. Noise doesn't always sound loud. Sometimes it's subtle. It shows up as expectations, opinions, trends, and constant input from the world around you. It's the pressure to keep up, to fit in, to choose paths that look successful even if they don't feel right. Over time, that noise can become so familiar that it starts to feel like your own voice. You tell yourself you want something, but if you pause long enough, you might realize that desire was shaped by what you've seen, what you've been told, or what others expect from you. The line between what's truly yours and what's been handed to you becomes blurred. That's where clarity begins to fade. Knowing, on the other hand, is quiet. It doesn't rush. It doesn't compete for attention. It doesn't try to prove anything. It's steady, grounded, and often simple. But because it's quiet, it's easy to overlook, especially in a world that rewards urgency and constant stimulation. The challenge is learning how to tell the difference. Noise feels urgent. It pushes you to act quickly, to decide without thinking too deeply. It often comes with comparison what others are doing, achieving, or expecting. It creates a sense that you're falling behind if you don't move fast enough. Knowing feels different. It doesn't pressure you. It doesn't demand immediate action. Instead, it gives you a sense of calm clarity even if the path ahead isn't fully formed. When something aligns with your knowing, it feels steady, not forced, clear, not chaotic, but accessing that knowing requires space. If your mind is constantly filled with notifications, conversations, opinions, and distractions, there's no room to hear your own thoughts clearly. This is why so many people feel disconnected from their direction. It's not that they don't have answers, it's that they haven't created the silence needed to hear them. Clarity isn't something you add to your life. It's something you uncover when you remove what doesn't belong. That means stepping back, turning down the volume of everything that isn't essential, questioning where your thoughts are coming from, asking yourself whether what you're pursuing is truly yours or simply familiar. This isn't always comfortable. Letting go of noise can feel like stepping away from certainty. Even when that certainty wasn't real to begin with, it can mean disappointing expectations, changing direction, or admitting that something you've been chasing doesn't actually matter to you. But on the other side of that discomfort is something far more valuable, clarity that belongs to you. Because once you can separate noise from knowing, your intention becomes stronger, your decisions become more grounded, and your path becomes clearer, not because the world got quieter, but because you learned which voice to trust. Chapter 4. The Power of Pause. In a world that rewards speed, pausing can feel unnatural. We're taught to act quickly, respond immediately, and keep things moving. Progress is often measured by how fast you go, how much you produce, and how efficiently you move from one task to the next. Slowing down can feel like falling behind, but when it comes to clarity, speed is not an advantage. In fact, rushing is often the very thing that clouds your judgment. The faster you move without intention, the more likely you are to react instead of choose. You make decisions based on pressure, urgency, or habits without ever stopping to ask if they truly align with what matters. That's where the pause becomes powerful. A pause is not an action. It's not avoidance or hesitation. It's a deliberate moment of space between stimulus and response, a chance to step back, observe, and choose your next move with awareness instead of impulse. I remember a moment at a miniature golf course that stayed with me long after the game was over. A family ahead of us accidentally hit their bright yellow ball into a shallow pool of dark, murky water. Without thinking, I offered to help retrieve it. I took a golf club and tried to guide the ball toward the edge, but the more I moved, the cloudier the water became. People started calling out, "Come on, just grab it." Even my own family grew impatient. Everyone wanted it done fast, but I could barely see the ball anymore. So I stopped. I said, "Give it a second." Reluctantly, everyone went quiet. We waited, and slowly, the water began to settle. The dirt sank, the surface cleared, and there it was, the yellow ball, plain and easy to see. This time, I didn't rush. I moved carefully, deliberately, and lifted it out without struggle. That moment taught me something simple but powerful. Clarity doesn't come from forcing action. It comes from allowing things to settle. When everything is stirred up pressure, urgency, noise, we lose sight of what we're trying to reach. But when we pause, even briefly, what we're looking for often becomes obvious. That's what the pause creates in your life. Without it, everything blends together: emotions, expectations, distractions. But when you give yourself space, the urgency settles, the noise softens, and what once felt overwhelming becomes clear enough to act on. Clarity doesn't come from doing more. It comes from seeing better, and seeing better requires stillness. The pause is where that happens. It's where intention begins to take shape, not in the rush of doing, but in the quiet space before it. Chapter 5. Values before vision. Most people start with a vision. They imagine where they want to be, what they want to achieve, and how they want their life to look. They set goals, build plans, and chase outcomes. Vision feels exciting because it pulls you forward into possibility. It gives direction. It creates momentum. But vision without values is unstable, because if you don't know what you stand for, it becomes very easy to chase things that look right but feel wrong. You can build a life that appears successful on the outside, while quietly feeling disconnected on the inside. You can reach goals that don't actually reflect who you are. That's because vision tells you where you're going, but values determine how you get there and whether it's even worth going. Values are the foundation of intention. They are the principles that guide your decisions when things are uncertain. They don't change based on trends, pressure, or emotion. They stay steady even when everything else shifts, and when you are clear on them, they become a filter for everything you do. Without that filter, every opportunity looks appealing. Every path seems valid. You end up reacting to what's in front of you instead of choosing based on what truly matters to you. And over time, that leads to misalignment. You might find yourself working toward goals that once sounded exciting but now feel heavy. You might realize you've said yes to things that don't reflect your priorities, not because you lack discipline, but because you lacked a clear foundation. Values change that. When you know what matters most, whether it's integrity, freedom, growth, stability, creativity, or connection, you begin to see your choices differently. You don't just ask, "Can I do this?" You ask, "Does this align with who I am?" That question simplifies everything. It doesn't make life easier in the sense that challenges disappear, but it makes life clearer in the sense that you no longer waste energy on things that pull you away from yourself. Think of values as your internal compass. A compass doesn't remove obstacles or guarantee smooth travel, but it always points you in the right direction, even when the path is unclear. And in moments of uncertainty, that becomes essential, because there will always be times when multiple options look good on paper, opportunities that seem equally valid, decisions that require more than logic, they require alignment. In those moments, your values are what keep you grounded. They remind you who you are when external noise tries to redefine you. This is why intention must be built on values before vision. Vision without values can take you anywhere, but vision guided by values takes you somewhere that actually matters. And when those two are aligned, something powerful happens. You stop chasing every possibility and start building a life that reflects what you truly stand for. Chapter 6. Clarity creates confidence. Confidence is often misunderstood. People think confidence comes from personality, being outgoing, fearless, or naturally bold. Others believe it comes from success, appearance, or how others respond to you. But real confidence is not something you are born with, and it is not something you receive from the outside. Confidence is what happens when you are clear, when you know what you stand for, when your intention is defined, and when your values are aligned with your actions. Something changes internally. You stop second-guessing yourself as often. You stop needing constant validation. You stop hesitating over every decision, because you have a reference point inside you that guides your choices. Uncertainty is what weakens confidence. When you are unclear, every decision feels heavier than it should. You overthink. You look outward for answers. You compare yourself to others, hoping to find direction in their choices. And because there is no internal anchor, even small decisions can feel overwhelming. But clarity simplifies everything. It doesn't remove difficulty, but it removes confusion. and confusion is what drains confidence the fastest. When things are clear, you are no longer constantly questioning whether you are on the right path. You begin to trust your ability to navigate it. Think about a time when you felt completely sure about something. It didn't necessarily mean the outcome was guaranteed. It meant you understood your reason. You knew why you were doing it. That understanding created a sense of steadiness, even if the result was uncertain. That is confidence rooted in clarity. It is not loud. It doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't rely on perfection or control. Instead, it comes from alignment when your actions match your intention, and your intention matches your values. Without clarity, confidence becomes fragile. It depends on external results. One success lifts you up. One setback shakes you. You are constantly trying to maintain a feeling that keeps slipping away because it was never grounded internally. But when clarity is present, confidence becomes stable. You can move forward even when you don't have all the answers. You can make decisions without needing approval. You can face uncertainty without collapsing into doubt, because your direction is clear enough to guide your next step. This is why clarity is not just about focus, it is about freedom. Freedom from overthinking, freedom from constant comparison, freedom from needing to be certain about everything before you act. You begin to trust that you can adjust as you go, because your foundation is solid even if the path shifts. And over time, something subtle but powerful happens. You stop trying to become confident. Instead, you become clear, and confidence becomes the natural result. Chapter 7. Decision-making with intention. Most people don't struggle with a lack of options. They struggle with too many. Every day, you are faced with decisions, some small, some life-shaping. What to focus on, what to say yes to, what to let go of, where to invest your time, energy, and attention. On the surface, it can seem like the challenge is choosing correctly, but the deeper issue is often not having a clear filter for making decisions at all. Without intention, decisions become reactive. You choose based on urgency, emotion, convenience, or what others expect. You say yes because it feels easier in the moment. You say no too late, after you are already overwhelmed. You move forward, but not always in the direction you actually want to go. Over time, these small, unintentional choices accumulate, not because you made one big mistake, but because you made many small decisions without alignment. And eventually, you look up and realize your life feels busy but not necessarily chosen. Intention changes the way you decide. When your intention is clear, every choice begins to pass through a simple internal question. Does this move me closer to what matters, or further away from it? That question becomes a filter. It doesn't guarantee easy decisions, but it makes them clearer. You start to notice that not all good opportunities are right opportunities. Something can be exciting, profitable, or socially approved and still not be aligned with where you are trying to go. Without intention, those differences are hard to see. With intention, they become obvious. This is where many people struggle, because saying no becomes necessary, and saying no is uncomfortable when you are used to reacting instead of choosing. It can feel like missing out, disappointing others, or limiting yourself. But in reality, every intentional no is what protects your deeper yes. Because intention is not just about what you pursue. It is also about what you refuse to let distract you. The more clearly you define your direction, the easier decisions become, not because life gets simpler, but because you become more grounded in what matters. You stop needing to analyze every option endlessly. Instead, you evaluate whether it aligns or doesn't, and alignment becomes the priority. This doesn't mean you will always know instantly what to do. Some decisions will still require reflection, patience, and adjustment. But even in uncertainty, intention gives you a starting point. It keeps you from drifting too far off course while you figure things out. Decision-making with intention is not about perfection. It is about consistency. It is about building a pattern of choices that reflect your values and your direction, even when it is inconvenient or uncomfortable. Because ultimately, your life is not shaped by your biggest decisions alone. It is shaped by the smaller ones you make every day, especially when no one is watching. And intention is what turns those moments into direction instead of drift. Chapter 8. Discipline without force. Discipline is often presented as something harsh. People talk about it as struggle, sacrifice, and willpower, as if success requires constant internal pressure. Forcing yourself to do what you don't want to do, pushing through resistance, and fighting against your own habits every step of the way. But discipline built on force is exhausting. It depends on motivation, and motivation is inconsistent. It depends on energy, and energy fluctuates. It depends on emotion, and emotion is unpredictable. So, when discipline is only powered by force, it eventually breaks down. There is another way. Discipline becomes easier when it is built on clarity. When your intention is clear, discipline stops feeling like a battle with yourself. Instead, it becomes a natural expression of alignment. You are no longer constantly arguing with your choices. You are simply acting in a way that reflects what you already know matters. This shift changes everything, because when you are unclear, every action requires negotiation. You have to convince yourself to start, convince yourself to continue, and convince yourself to avoid distractions. That constant internal resistance is what makes discipline feel so difficult. But when you are clear, the resistance decreases. You still experience challenges, but you are no longer confused about why you are doing what you are doing. And when the reason is strong and present, action becomes easier to sustain. Not because it is effortless, but because it is aligned. Think of discipline less as force and more as direction. A river does not need to force itself to flow downhill. It simply follows the path created by gravity and terrain. In the same way, when your intention is clear and your values are defined, your actions begin to flow in a consistent direction without as much internal struggle. This does not mean you will never face resistance. You will still have moments of distraction, fatigue, and doubt. But instead of relying on willpower alone, you can return to your intention. You can reconnect with why something matters and allow that clarity to guide your next step. Discipline becomes a return, not a fight. A return to focus, a return to alignment, a return to what you already decided is important. This is why clarity is more sustainable than force. Force burns energy. Clarity conserves it. Force creates tension. Clarity creates direction. And over time, that difference determines whether your habits feel like punishment or purpose. When discipline is forced, you eventually resist it. When discipline is clear, you eventually trust it. And trust is what makes consistency possible, because you are no longer relying on momentary motivation to carry you forward. You are relying on something deeper, clear intention that guides you even when motivation is not present. That is where real discipline begins, not in pressure, but in alignment. Chapter 9. Staying aligned in a distracted world. It has never been easier to lose focus. We live in a world designed to pull your attention in 1,000 directions at once. Notifications, messages, news, entertainment, opinions, everything is competing for your mind, and most of it is engineered to be urgent, even when it is not important. Over time, this constant pull doesn't just distract you, it fragments you. You start the day with intention, but by midday you are responding instead of leading. You open your phone for one thing and end up somewhere completely unrelated. You sit down to focus, but your attention keeps slipping away before you even realize it. And slowly, without noticing, your direction gets replaced by reaction. This is the challenge of the modern world. Not a lack of opportunity, but a lack of attention. Staying aligned requires more than good intentions in the morning. It requires awareness throughout the day. Because distraction doesn't usually show up as something obvious. It shows up as small decisions that feel harmless in the moment, but slowly pull you off course. A quick check of your phone, a conversation that drains your focus, a task that feels urgent but isn't truly important, a habit of saying yes without pausing to consider alignment. Each one seems minor, but together, they shape the direction of your life. That is why intention must be actively protected. Staying aligned does not mean isolating yourself from the world or eliminating all distractions. That is unrealistic. It means learning to recognize when you are being pulled away from what matters and gently returning. Returning is the key word, because you will drift. Everyone does. The goal is not perfection. The goal is awareness. You notice the drift, and you come back. Come back to your intention. Come back to your values. Come back to the direction you chose when you were clear and grounded. That practice, repeated consistently, is what keeps your life aligned even in a noisy environment. There is also power in designing your environment to support your focus. What you repeatedly see, hear, and engage with influences your thinking more than you realize. If everything around you is chaotic, your mind will struggle to stay steady. But if you intentionally reduce unnecessary noise, you create space for clarity to grow. Still, even with the best environment, distraction will always exist. That is why alignment is not about control, it is about awareness. You cannot eliminate every distraction, but you can choose which ones deserve your attention. You can notice when you are drifting and decide, again and again, to return to what matters. This is not a one-time decision. It is a daily practice. And over time, that practice becomes strength. Not the kind of strength that forces focus, but the kind that recognizes when you are off course and brings you back without judgment. Because in a distracted world, clarity is not just something you have. It is something you protect. Chapter 10. Living your intention daily. Clarity means very little if it stays in your thoughts. It is one thing to understand your intention. It is another thing entirely to live it consistently, in real time, through ordinary decisions that make up your day. This is where most people struggle, not in understanding what matters, but in staying connected to it when life gets busy, unpredictable, or overwhelming. Living with intention is not a single decision. It is a repeated return. You will not wake up one day and remain perfectly aligned forever. There will be moments where you drift, moments where urgency takes over, moments where old habits, distractions, and external pressures pull you away from what you know is important. This is normal. The goal is not perfection. The goal is awareness. Each day becomes an opportunity to check in with yourself, not in a complicated way, but in a simple and honest one. Am I acting from intention? Or am I reacting out of habit? Am I moving in a direction that reflects my values? Or just responding to whatever feels urgent right now? These questions do not require long reflection. They require honesty, and honesty brings you back. There was a point where this became real for me. I started making videos, putting myself in front of the camera and sharing thoughts, ideas, and experiences. At first, it was just something I was trying. But over time, something became clear. I wasn't just interested in making videos. I was drawn to telling stories, to sharing insights, to creating something that could shift the way someone thinks or sees their own life. That clarity changed how I spent my time. I realized I wanted to create audiobooks, something more intentional, more complete, something that could bring together stories, ideas, and meaning in a way that lasted longer than a single moment. Once that became clear, my behavior followed. I started spending my free time differently. I wasn't forcing discipline or trying to stay motivated. I was naturally pulled toward it, brainstorming ideas, writing, refining, and building something I actually cared about. I worked on packaging the audiobook, adding layers, thinking about how it would feel to listen to not just the words, but the experience, the sound, the pacing, the small details that bring something to life. It didn't feel like something I had to do. It felt like something I had chosen. Through audiobooks, I started to see something different. I could create once and still have impact happening while I wasn't actively working on it. Subscribers, views, comments, growth that continued without my constant presence. It wasn't limited to one person at a time anymore. It was a reach that could extend to hundreds, thousands, even more over time. Friends, family, and people I had never met could all experience the same message simultaneously. That's when I began to understand what leverage really looked like in practice. That's the difference clarity creates. When you are unclear, you have to push yourself constantly. When you are clear, you begin to move with direction even when no one is asking you to. Because intention is not something you prove once. It is something you practice repeatedly, in how you speak, in what you agree to, in what you choose to prioritize when time is limited, in what you say no to, even when it would be easier to say yes. Over time, these small decisions begin to shape your identity. You stop thinking of intention as an idea and start living it as a pattern. People begin to experience you differently. not because you are trying to appear a certain way, but because your actions consistently reflect what you value. This is where real change happens, not in dramatic moments, but in quiet consistency. A single intentional choice may not feel significant, but 100 of them create direction, 1,000 of them create momentum, and eventually, they become the life you are living without needing to think about it so deliberately anymore. That is the power of daily intention. It turns clarity into behavior. It turns behavior into identity, and identity into a life that feels aligned from the inside out. There will still be challenges. There will still be uncertainty. Life does not become simple just because your intention is clear, but you move through those challenges differently. You move with awareness instead of confusion, with direction instead of drift, with purpose instead of reaction. And when you inevitably lose your way, you do not start over, you return. You return to your intention. You return to your values. You return to the simple truth you already know. Because living with intention is not about never drifting. It is about always finding your way back. Conclusion: the life that follows clarity. At the end of everything, life is not shaped by what you know, it is shaped by what you consistently act on. You can have goals, plans, and ideas. You can understand your strengths, your potential, and your direction. But without clarity of intention, even the best insight turns into scattered effort, and scattered effort rarely leads anywhere meaningful. A clear intention was never about adding more to your life. It was about removing what doesn't belong, the noise, the pressure, the automatic reactions that pull you in directions you didn't consciously choose. Because underneath all of that, there is something simpler and more honest waiting to be lived. A life guided by awareness, direction, and alignment. Clarity does not eliminate uncertainty. It does not guarantee that every decision will be easy or that every path will be smooth. Life will still shift. Circumstances will still change. There will still be moments where you cannot see the full picture. But clarity changes how you move through those moments. You pause instead of rushing. You choose instead of reacting. You return instead of drifting further away. And even when the path is unclear, you are no longer lost, you are navigating. That difference is everything, because a clear intention does not give you control over life. It gives you control over your direction within it. It grounds you when things feel unstable. It reminds you that you do not need perfect conditions to move forward, only enough awareness to take the next step with purpose. And that step is always available to you. The real work is not in understanding these ideas. It is in living them, in noticing when you are off track, in having the honesty to admit it, in choosing, again and again, to return to what matters, not perfectly, but consistently, because clarity is not something you find once. It is something you practice. Each time you pause, each time you say no with intention, each time you choose alignment over convenience. Over time, those choices begin to shape your life. Your decisions become clearer. Your energy becomes more focused. Your direction becomes more your own. And slowly, almost without noticing, your life begins to feel less like something you are reacting to and more like something you are creating. That is the life that follows clarity. Not a perfect life, but a life that is chosen. And in the end, that is what makes all the difference.